AI is taking our jobs and people are pissed about it. Okay, to be fair, it's a bit more complicated and nuanced than that. I, for one, believe in Jevons paradox. I think it's real, and I think in the long run, AI will probably generate more jobs. But in the short term, we are going to go through these growing pains of rounds of layoffs. But the reality of the situation is that people and employees are very worried about this right now. And rightfully so. We keep seeing CEOs lay off swaths of employees and citing generative AI in their press release as part of the reason for the layoff. That happened just the other week with Intuit when they laid off around 1,200 people. Gen AI was cited directly in the press release. And I've seen a handful of other examples recently as well. But today I want to talk a little bit about building product and marketing that product within the context of people being worried about AI taking their jobs. There's a really interesting case study on this that just came out earlier this month, so earlier in July, and it's by Lattice. The CEO of Lattice announced a feature for digital workers in their system that completely blew up in their faces, and we're going to do a teardown on that so we can better understand how did they go wrong, how did they market and frame this feature wrong, and how can we do better in the future as we're talking about AI driven software. So if you don't know Lattice, this is their homepage. Manage people and their performance. They're kind of an HR platform. They're valued at $3 billion. They raised 175 million in a Series F in 2022. They're a big company. They're a well-established company. If you've been in tech for a little while, worked at a few different companies, you've probably either interacted with this software or your manager has or your HR team has. It's pretty commonplace in the software ecosystem and outside of tech as well. A lot of companies use Lattice for their HR systems. So we're going to talk about this press release right here. This is Sarah Franklin. She's been their CEO for 7 months now, so she's relatively new. Um, I'm sure she's great. I don't know much about Sarah. I'm not really talking about her specifically. She has a really colorful resume. I'm sure she's super smart. But we're just going to talk about some of the language in this press release and the way that her and her team chose to frame this feature and how it kind of blew up in their faces. So, the general idea behind the feature is typically what you do in Lattice as an organization is each employee gets input into Lattice's system, and then you can manage that employee, manage your one-on-ones, manage their performance, manage their quarterly goals, and so on and so forth. Get that employee's feedback all through Lattice. And the feature that is being announced right now, or was earlier this month, is that same system being available for digital workers or AI employees. So, alongside your human staff, you can input your AI staff members into Lattice to manage them, manage their performance and goals, and so on and so forth. Today, Lattice made history to become the first company to lead in the responsible employment of AI digital workers by creating a digital employee record to govern them with transparency and accountability. The idea of AI employees or digital workers is not an entirely comfortable one, especially as we see them being personified. The inevitable arrival of these digital workers raises important questions about their integration, measurement, and impact on human jobs, and many of those questions are without clear answers or precedents. Within Lattice's people platform, digital workers will be securely onboarded, trained, and assigned goals, performance metrics, appropriate system access, and even an accountable manager. Okay, two things right off the bat that I'm noticing. There's this phrase digital workers in quotations that's used twice. Um, I'm not going to say this is the first time I've ever seen it or the first time it's been used, but it's definitely not that commonplace. And it feels like Lattice is really trying to push this term right now. They're really trying to frame this idea of digital workers. And they're also combining that with this idea, the responsible employment of AI digital workers. This is this is just kind of tone deaf, honestly. Um, there's a lot of people, rightfully so, talking about being concerned that AI is going to take their jobs. There's literally nobody talking about how do we responsibly employ AI. That is not a problem that is being discussed in the market, in the industry, in the world. That is not it's not a solution that we're looking for. No one's really talking about the responsible employment of AI. Okay, so this post got 313 comments until comments got turned off. Let's read a couple highlights. I cannot believe I've used this emoji 3 times today, but here it goes, faceplant. Peak AI hype reached. Next up, unlimited PTO, health insurance, and retirement fund for AI employees. That's great. Um, there's still time to delete this. And this one's pretty cold. Maybe it's time to revisit your mission statement and a screenshot from the formal press release that we're going to look at here in a second. At the bottom of it, it says Lattice because people. Oops. A pretty clear departure from their mission statement. We're not talking about people. We're talking about digital workers. We're talking about AI employees, this kind of new term that Lattice is pushing. Let's look at a couple highlights from the actual press release. There's some additional language in here that I think is really instructive. So today, Lattice marks history, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of the same as her LinkedIn post. You will notice that in addition to comments being turned off, they also rolled the feature back 3 days later. Here's the line. This innovation sparked a lot of conversation and questions that have no answers yet. That is true. We look forward to continuing to work with our customers on the responsible use of AI, but will not further pursue digital workers in the product. Yeah, they just completely rolled it back. Man, that's a tough lesson to learn. There's other ways to go about getting this type of information. The way that the Lattice team chose to go about getting this information is by in a very, very public manner. They created a press release, a public press release written by their CEO. They made a LinkedIn post about it, and it's all public. There's other ways to go about getting this type of feedback that would result in rolling the feature back, or even better, if you're doing good product management, never building it to begin with. There's a lot to learn here. Really, the Lattice team probably should have never built this feature. Based on the screenshots in this press release, it looks like they did. Hopefully, they didn't spend too long on it. But yeah, really, what they should have been doing is talking to people early on, validating the idea, validating that the problem exists, responsible employment of AI. I don't think that that problem exists, not yet at least. And then determining whether or not the solution is viable and something that the market really wants and should be built. It looks like they did not do that. It looks like they built the thing, launched the thing, and then learned that it was a terrible idea. That's an expensive lesson to learn. AI is transforming the workforce not just as a tool, but as an entity we work alongside with. Okay. We're seeing AI personas like Devin, the engineer, Harvey, the lawyer, Einstein, the service agent, and Piper, the sales agent, enter the workforce and become our colleagues. Are we though? There's so much language and framing in here that I think is just tone deaf. Um, Really, what they're trying to do in this press release is they're trying so hard to elevate these LLM driven AI tools to the level of a human employee. And it kind of makes sense that they would want to do that because they're an HR system where you manage people. I see where they're coming from. It's wrong. It's not the right way to go about it. Um, Not just as a tool, but as an entity we work alongside with. That is maybe okay, but I think a better framing here is just use the word agents. Agents is already out there. Um, and say an agent that works for us, not alongside with. If if in reality we're working alongside with the agent, okay, but in your framing, in your language, in your press release, elevate the human, right? There's just so much concern out there about AI taking jobs, so don't feed into that. Be aware of that and counteract it in your language. Here's another line. Enter the workforce and become our colleagues. Become our colleagues. Become our colleagues. There's a lot loaded in that. I don't think of ChatGPT as my colleague. I would not think of Devin as my colleague. or Harvey Einstein or Piper. I would not think of them as colleagues. I never would think to do that. And I think this is just tone deaf. What does it mean to hire a digital worker? How are they onboarded? How are they measured? What does this mean for my job, for future jobs of our children? Will they share our values? These are interesting questions, and I think that they're important questions. I just think that the problem here is couching these questions in the context of AI employees, AI colleagues, AI coworkers. That's the problem. These questions need to be answered at some point because I agree it is fairly inevitable that systems like Devin, Harvey, Einstein, Piper, they're going to become more commonplace and they're going to be integrated into our systems and be doing tasks on our behalf, making calls for us, writing little bits of code for us, and so on. And these are questions that need to be answered. I think they're questions that probably are still needing to be answered by the companies that are building these tools. And it makes sense that Lattice is thinking about this. How do we actually integrate these systems into our organization? Again, I think it's mostly a product marketing misstep here. They're not completely off. They're just a bit early strategically. They're probably about 6 months to 12 months early. And so that's really why it blew up in their face. Lattice, we're committed to leading the way in responsible employment of AI. I still don't know what irresponsible employment of AI means. I don't know what that means. Um, I'd love if they actually defined the problem for us. This marks a significant moment in evolution of AI tech, the moment when the idea of an AI employee moves from concept to reality in a system and into the org chart. We don't need AI in our org charts. We just don't. That's that's not the problem that I want Lattice to be solving. Um, and honest again, I think it's a framing problem. I just don't want them to be thinking about it in these terms. And finally, the signature, Sarah Lattice, because people, back to that mission statement that does not seem to align with this press release very well. It's a bit ironic. Just for giggles, I put that same press release into ChatGPT to ask it what it thought. Here's an interesting little response. However, it could benefit from a more nuanced and compassionate approach, especially regarding the potential impacts on human employees. Acknowledging concerns more explicitly and providing concrete examples of support for human workers would enhance this message's compassion and effectiveness. Okay, so if there's one takeaway from this exercise that I want you to leave with, it's not that the idea of digital workers is bad or the idea of AI employees is bad. Um, it's kind of inevitable. I actually tend to agree with what Lattice is thinking about here. The main takeaway is that as we move forward with this technology and as we integrate it more deeply into our organizations and our workflows, we need to be mindful of the language that we're using, the framing of the problem, and how we're communicating the value to the people that are going to be using it and to the people that, in particular, are concerned that it's going to be replacing them and taking their jobs from them. Because the more that we put that front and center in our own minds, the more we are able to actually navigate those issues in a way that minimizes the impact on human employees. I think if there's one thing that this Lattice press release has done for the broader community that's really quite helpful is pose this question, not directly, but sort of indirectly, pose this question of what does irresponsible employment of AI look like? Again, I struggle with that word employment here. I might I might say something more like what does irresponsible adoption of AI in the workforce look like? Um, and I think that's something that we should be chewing on, we should be thinking about together and having a conversation around that because it's not Lattice's job to define that problem alone. We collectively need to define the problem of what irresponsible adoption of AI in the workforce really looks like so that the Lattices of the world can solve that problem effectively. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Andrew. Give me a comment, give me a subscription. Would love to see you at the next video. Peace.